What if I told you that God has a side in this story? But not in the way you might think. Most people believe that the eternal dispute between Jews and Arabs is simply a matter of religion or territory. But what if I told you that this common view is far from the truth? What you are going to discover today are deep and surprising secrets that will completely change your perception of this historical conflict. Interested? Then comment now. I receive the blessing that the Lord is giving me right now. Just comment that, and when I see your comment, I'll give it a heart because I know you will receive these blessings soon. Now that you have commented, let's reveal the mysteries that have shaped this war for centuries and how this might impact your life in unexpected ways. Many believe that the conflict between Jews and Arabs is, at its core, a fierce territorial dispute over sacred lands. According to this common view, the heart of the matter lies in two peoples fighting over a piece of land that, for both, has deep significance. However, this simplistic perspective does not capture the complexity and historical layers at play. Instead of seeing the conflict as a battle for territory, we need to look beyond the surface and understand that the dispute is much more intricate and rooted in factors beyond the geographical. Another frequently addressed point is the religious aspect. The popular belief is that Jews and Arabs are at war because of their differences in faith. For many, the conflict seems to be an eternal religious war, where followers of Judaism and Islam cannot coexist peacefully due to their divergent beliefs. However, this view ignores how religion, though a significant factor, is just one of many dimensions shaping this complex dispute. The reality is that religion is often used as a tool to reinforce identities and justify actions, rather than being the primary cause of the conflict. When we delve into history, we realize that the simplistic narrative that ties the conflict only to religion and territory does not take into account the complex cultural and political interactions that have contributed to the current situation. Historical events, alliances, and power shifts have shaped and redefined borders and relations over the centuries. It is essential to understand that what many see as a millennia-old dispute is actually the result of a series of events rooted in various eras and political contexts. Have you ever stopped to reflect on how foreign powers play a crucial role in perpetuating this conflict? The popular view often does not consider the significant influence that external actors have, funding and supporting factions to advance their own strategic interests. These international interests often further complicate the resolution of the conflict, turning it into a global chess game where the real players are often far from the front lines. External manipulation adds a layer of complexity that challenges the simplistic view of the dispute. Finally, it is vital to recognize that reducing the conflict to merely a question of territory and religion does not help resolve tensions or promote peace. This approach not only disregards the multiple factors at play, but can also fuel prejudices and stereotypes that perpetuate animosity. Instead of accepting the simplistic view, we should seek to understand the true roots of the conflict and consider solutions that address the complexity and multiple dimensions of this prolonged dispute. Only then can we begin to pave the way for a deeper understanding and eventually reconciliation. The popular view that limits the conflict between Jews and Arabs to a simple dispute over territory and religion ignores the profound historical and cultural complexities shaping this situation. This reductionist narrative fails to capture the multifaceted truth of a conflict that spans millennia. The truth is that the issue is not just about a piece of land or superficial religious differences. It involves an intricate web of historical, social, and political factors that are often overlooked by this simplified view. Moreover, this perspective often overlooks the influence of political decisions and international agreements that have shaped the current landscape. History reveals how foreign powers have played crucial roles in setting borders and supporting different factions, often in ways that have exacerbated the conflict. When focusing solely on the religious and territorial dispute, the impact of these external dynamics, which have a direct influence on the perpetuation of the conflict, is lost. Another fundamental flaw of this simplistic view is the lack of recognition of internal diversity within both groups involved. Jews and Arabs are not homogeneous blocks. They are composed of a variety of groups with different perspectives, interests, and objectives. Reducing the conflict to a dispute between two monolithic entities ignores the complexities of identities and internal divisions that exist within each group. This perceptual error prevents a richer and more nuanced understanding of the conflict. Have you ever wondered how the popular narrative might disregard the fundamental role of the economy and natural resources? The struggle for resources like water and oil has been a powerful force in the dynamics of the conflict, often overshadowing religious and territorial issues. When the common view fails to include these economic aspects, it becomes incomplete and fails to reflect the reality of local and regional disputes that intensify the conflict. Finally, the simplified view that the conflict is merely a matter of religion and territory does not offer a practical or effective solution for resolving tensions. This narrow understanding does not allow for the development of peace strategies that can address the deep-rooted causes and multiple layers of the conflict. Only by recognizing the true complexity behind the disputes and considering all the factors involved can we begin to find real pathways to reconciliation and lasting peace. To understand the historical origins of the conflict between Jews and Arabs, we need to go back to ancient times, well before the formation of modern states. The relationship between these two peoples began to form in the Middle East, where their histories intertwined in complex and profound ways. The beginnings of interactions between Jews and Arabs date back to biblical times, when the stories of the patriarchs Abraham and Ishmael, ancestors of the Arabs, and Abraham and Isaac, ancestors of the Jews, began to shape the foundations of their identities and historical narratives. Moving to the medieval period, the coexistence between Jews and Arabs experienced ups and downs. During the medieval Islamic period, the relationship was relatively peaceful compared to the conflicts that would arise later. Cities like Baghdad and Cordoba were centers of learning and culture, where Jews and Arabs collaborated and exchanged knowledge. However, political changes and power dynamics frequently altered this harmony, and disputes over power and influence began to intensify, planting the seeds for future conflicts. The 20th century brought a new dimension to the conflict with the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. The Zionist movement, which aimed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine, clashed directly with the local Arab population, which opposed the idea of a Jewish state in the region. The immediate impact was armed conflict with neighboring Arab countries, marking the beginning of a series of wars and confrontations that would shape the political and social landscape of the region. This event was not only a matter of territoriality, but also a turning point that radicalized positions and tensions between the two groups. Have you ever reflected on how the role of European colonial powers contributed to the complexity of the conflict? During the British Mandate in Palestine, decisions and policies often favored one group over the other, intensifying divisions and creating fertile ground for confrontation. The legacy of these decisions continues to affect relations between Jews and Arabs, revealing how external involvement can exacerbate and perpetuate conflicts. Finally, the persistence of the conflict is marked by a series of recent events that continue to fuel the flames of animosity. Intifadas, failed peace agreements, and the ongoing construction of settlements are just a few examples of the issues that perpetuate tension. These modern occurrences are largely the result of the complex interactions and historical legacies that have shaped the conflict, showing that to achieve true understanding, it is necessary to recognize and address the multiple layers of history and impact that define this ongoing struggle. Religious texts are beacons that illuminate the beliefs and practices of Jews and Arabs, shaping not only their worldviews, but also the daily behavior of these peoples. For Jews, the Torah is more than a set of laws. It is a divine guide that directs life in all aspects, from daily rituals to ethics and morality. Similarly, the Quran for Muslim Arabs is not just a sacred book, but the eternal word of God that dictates how they should live, worship, and interact with others. These texts are fundamental to each group's identity and profoundly influence their views on coexistence and conflict. Religious traditions also play a crucial role in shaping attitudes and behaviors toward the other. For many Jews, the history of persecution and the promise of a promised land are central elements that reinforce resilience and internal cohesion. On the other hand, Muslim traditions, which include teachings on the importance of justice and respect for others, often come into tension with the experiences of Arabs in a context of conflict. These traditions shape how each group perceives their own actions and those of the other, often intensifying divisions and animosities. Have you ever stopped to think about how the interpretation of scriptures can vary and consequently influence conflicts? The way sacred texts are interpreted can have a profound impact on the perception of legitimacy and rights over lands and resources. Some interpretations may intensify the idea that the conflict is an inevitable divine battle, while others may promote the idea of peace and reconciliation. The diversity in interpretations of scriptures contributes to the complexity of the views and actions of the peoples involved, making the conflict even more intricate. Moreover, the influence of traditions is not limited to theory. It manifests in daily practices and celebrations that can both unite and divide. Religious festivals and ritual practices are often used to assert identity and resistance, which can increase the separation between groups. At the same time, some practices have the potential to foster understanding and empathy, although these opportunities are often overshadowed by the weight of traditions that sustain the conflict. Finally, the interaction between religious texts and traditions is a cycle that perpetuates the narrative of the conflict. Scriptures and traditions not only influence the views and behavior of peoples, but are also reinforced and shaped by experiences lived during times of conflict. This cycle creates a complex web where beliefs shape reality and reality reinforces beliefs. To break this cycle, it is essential to understand the profound influence of these factors and to seek ways to reinterpret and transform traditions and texts to promote peace and mutual understanding. Geopolitical and economic interests play a crucial role in perpetuating wars between Jews and Arabs. In a region rich in strategic resources like oil and gas, control over these resources can be a powerful motivator for the continuation of the conflict. The struggle for dominance over these riches is not only a matter of immediate wealth, but also of global influence. The presence of oil and other valuable resources turns the conflict into a global chessboard, where regional and international powers move their pieces to secure a strategic advantage. Geopolitics also influences the alliances and support that fuel the conflict. Countries with strategic interests in the region often align with one side, providing military, financial, or political support. These external supports not only enhance the combat capability of those involved, but also prolong the conflict by creating a dynamic where peaceful resolution becomes increasingly difficult. Alliances formed based on geopolitical interests can strengthen combat positions and paradoxically make peace an even more distant prospect. Have you ever considered how international intervention can amplify the conflict? External powers often enter the scene not only to advance their own interests, but also to directly influence the course of events. Military interventions, support for specific factions, and even peace negotiations are shaped by the interests of these powers, often ignoring or aggravating local dynamics. Such intervention can turn a regional conflict into a global geopolitical issue, intensifying the dispute and making resolution more challenging. Moreover, international intervention is not limited to military actions. It also includes agreements and treaties that may benefit certain groups at the expense of others. Often these agreements are negotiated without fully considering the needs and aspirations of local populations, resulting in solutions that may satisfy the interests of external powers, but do not address the root causes of the conflict. The impact of these agreements can be seen in how confrontation lines shift and how tensions rise when promises are not fulfilled. Ultimately, the perpetuation of the conflict is fueled by a combination of strategic interests and external intervention that continuously shapes the scenario. The interaction between these factors creates a cycle where peaceful resolution becomes increasingly difficult to achieve. Understanding these aspects is crucial for any serious attempt to resolve the conflict, as only by addressing the complex network of interests and external influences can we begin to envision real and sustainable solutions for peace in the region. The conflict between Jews and Arabs is not just a territorial or political dispute. It has a deep spiritual component that is often overlooked. For Jews, the Promised Land is not just a piece of territory, but a sacred place promised by God, as described in the Scriptures. This spiritual understanding strengthens collective identity and the determination to protect and claim the land they consider divinely designated. The spiritual connection to the land becomes a powerful factor, influencing the actions and decisions of individuals and communities. Similarly, for many Muslim Arabs, the Holy Land, which includes Jerusalem, has profound spiritual significance. The presence of sacred sites, such as the Al-Aqsa Mosque, gives the conflict a dimension that goes beyond the physical and material. For them, defending these sites is a matter of faith and commitment to their spiritual identity. The dispute over these sacred sites is therefore much more than a simple issue of territorial control. It is a battle for the right to worship and preserve spiritual heritage. Have you considered how religious symbols can intensify the conflict? Symbols like the Western Wall for Jews and the Dome of the Rock for Muslims carry deep and often conflicting meanings. These symbols are imbued with history and spirituality, and the dispute over them can turn into a battle of sacred representations. Reverence for these symbols means that any threat or change in their administration is perceived as an attack on the faith itself, igniting the flames of conflict with renewed intensity. Furthermore, spiritual beliefs often influence how religious and political leaders approach the conflict. Many leaders use spiritual rhetoric to mobilize their followers and justify actions, often exacerbating tensions. Discourse that appeals to spiritual aspects can have immense power to inspire and galvanize the masses, but it can also close off pathways to reconciliation. When approaching the conflict from a spiritual perspective, barriers often arise that hinder dialogue and mutual understanding. Finally, the spiritual side of the conflict reflects the deep historical roots and entrenched identities that define the relationships between Jews and Arabs. The struggle is not just over territory or resources, but also involves a connection to something deeper and transcendental. Understanding this spiritual dimension is essential for any attempt at resolution, as it reveals how beliefs and symbols shape attitudes and decisions, and how finding a path to peace requires sensitivity to these powerful spiritual forces. Did you know that the conflict between Jews and Arabs is fueled by historical secrets that rarely come to light? One of these secrets is the complex web of alliances and internal rivalries that have shaped the dispute over the centuries. Many people do not realize that behind the facade of the conflict, there are power dynamics and internal rivalries that make resolution even more complex. Clans, factions, and local leaders have their own interests and agendas, which often conflict with the simplified narrative we know. These hidden alliances and rivalries are crucial to understanding the depth and persistence of the dispute. Another vital secret is the impact of promises made by external powers throughout history. During the colonial period, for example, many agreements and treaties were signed without considering the complex cultural and political realities of the region. These agreements often favored one side at the expense of another, generating resentment and future conflicts. The influence of colonial powers, with their contradictory promises and conflicting interests, played a fundamental role in shaping the tensions we still see today. Have you ever stopped to think about how natural resources beyond oil have influenced the conflict? While oil is widely recognized, other resources such as water and arable land also play a crucial role. In a region where essential resources are scarce, competition for these resources can heighten tensions in ways that are not immediately visible. The struggle for control over water sources and agricultural land often exacerbates the conflict, revealing a lesser-known but equally significant aspect of the dispute. Moreover, many overlook the impact of narratives and historical myths perpetuated by both sides. These myths, often passed down through generations, shape how peoples perceive each other and the conflict itself. Stories of past victories and defeats, interpreted and reinterpreted, fuel a distorted view of the current reality. Understanding how these narratives shape behavior and expectations is essential for uncovering the true reasons behind the persistence of the conflict. Finally, there is a spiritual and symbolic dimension that many do not consider, but is fundamental to understanding the true impact of the war. Religious symbols and sacred sites are imbued with deep meaning and are often used to justify actions and mobilize support. The dispute over these sacred symbols goes beyond the physical and reaches the emotional and spiritual, making the conflict even more intense and difficult to resolve. The importance of these symbols reveals a fundamental aspect of the struggle that is often underestimated but has a profound impact on the perpetuation of the war. When Jesus told us to observe the fig tree, he was using a metaphor that goes far beyond a simple tree. In the biblical context, the fig tree is often interpreted as a symbol of Israel. In Matthew 24:32-33, the fig tree is not just a tree, it is a profound and revealing sign of Israel's spiritual and political situation. Jesus is calling us to understand that just as the fig tree shows clear signs of change before it bears fruit, Israel, like the fig tree, also provides signs of the fulfillment of divine promises and the proximity of his second coming. But what exactly should we observe? The fig tree, as a symbol of Israel, reveals the central role of the country in biblical prophecies. The restoration and events involving Israel are often seen as signs of the end times. Since the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948, many scholars and believers view this as the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecies Jesus spoke about. The fig tree flourishing is a testament to the ongoing relevance of Israel in God's plan, and observing this symbol helps us see how current events align with the scriptures. But have you ever stopped to consider what these signs really mean for your spiritual life? By telling us to observe the fig tree, Jesus invites us to reflect on the transformation happening in Israel. This country is not just a physical location, but also a point of spiritual and prophetic convergence. When significant events occur in Israel, they are not just news, they are signs that we should interpret in light of the scriptures. The growing political tension, peace and conflict events, and even social changes in Israel can be seen as indicators of Christ's return. How do you view the relationship between news about Israel and biblical prophecies? It is not just about observing, but understanding what the fig tree represents for our faith. The fig tree, like Israel, is in constant evolution and transformation. Jesus warns us not to be apathetic or uninformed, but to study and interpret the signs that God is placing before us. The emergence of new nations, peace agreements, and even the return of the Jews to their promised land are visible signs that should motivate us to live with renewed expectation and active faith. Finally, the metaphor of the fig tree calls us to spiritual vigilance and a deeper engagement with the scriptures. If the fig tree represents Israel and the signs of the times, then our role is to be prepared and alert, living a life that reflects the hope and anticipation of Christ's return. Observing the fig tree is a constant reminder that we should be ready and live in a way that honors the expectation of Jesus' return. The fig tree challenges us to be vigilant, informed, and spiritually prepared for the times to come. As we reflect on everything we've discussed, there is one piece of advice that God gives us clearly and that deserves to be repeated. Stay vigilant and attentive to the things unfolding around us, especially in the context of the scriptures. Repeating, stay vigilant and attentive to the things unfolding around us. I emphasize this message because it is vital for our spiritual walk. We cannot allow the signs to go unnoticed or become indifferent to the prophetic realities being revealed. On my YouTube channel, I focus on three main objectives: educate, inspire, and elevate others to draw closer to Jesus, our Lord and Savior. Use this channel as a valuable resource on your spiritual journey. And if you watched until now, I want to know. Comment now. I stayed until the end. Just comment that. When I see your comment, I will give a heart, because I know I added value to you and will feel even more motivated to always bring the best quality content. Now on your screen, a powerful video is appearing that is the sequel to this one. It is filled with riches, secrets about God, and much more that will accelerate your results in all areas of your life. Click on that video. Do it now. Don't miss the opportunity to continue your journey of knowledge and spiritual growth.